Late at night, the streets of Los Angeles are quieter than usual, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. Keanu Reeves, after wrapping up a late meeting for his latest movie project, is driving through the city, his mind still turning over the day's discussions. The car hums gently as it cruises along the road. It's been a long day, but Keanu's used to the late nights. Hollywood is a strange world of constant activity, but tonight, something feels different. As he makes a right turn near a quiet shopping plaza. His headlights fall on a dusty old sedan parked on the side of the road. At first, it looks like just another abandoned car, but there's something that catches Keanu's attention. He slows down and notices that the car's rear window is slightly cracked open, the soft sound of a baby crying coming from inside. He furrows his brow, instinctively feeling that something is wrong. Keanu pulls his car to a stop a few feet away from the old sedan, and for a moment he simply watches. There's a woman sitting in the front seat, her face barely visible through the cracked windshield. She's hunched over, cradling a baby in her arms. The car looks like it's seen better days. Dirt streaks along the windows, and the tires are worn down. The woman's clothes are simple, and though she's doing her best to comfort the baby, there's a sense of helplessness in her posture. For a few seconds, Keanu remains still. He's no stranger to hardship in his own life, and though he doesn't want to make assumptions, there's something about this situation that doesn't sit right. He's seen enough in his time in the city to recognize when someone is in need. This isn't just a woman in a car. This is someone who is fighting to survive. Without overthinking, Keanu parks his car and steps out into the cool night air. He walks slowly toward the old sedan, his shoes making soft tapping sounds on the pavement. He doesn't want to startle her, so he keeps his distance, observing her for a moment longer. The woman seems to be doing everything she can to calm the baby, who is crying loudly now. Her face is tired, the lines around her eyes deep with exhaustion. Her clothes are rumpled, as if she hasn't had the energy to care for herself in a long time. "Excuse me," Keanu calls gently, making sure his voice is soft so as not to scare her. "Are you all right?" The woman looks up quickly, surprised by the unexpected voice. Her eyes widen at the sight of Keanu standing there, his face kind but not intrusive. She wipes her hand across her forehead, clearly embarrassed, and pulls the baby closer to her chest. For a moment, there's an awkward silence as she searches for words. I'm fine," she stammers, her voice shaky. I just need to figure things out." Keanu watches her carefully, sensing the struggle behind her words. There's a quiet desperation in her voice, and something tells him that she's been fighting this battle alone for far too long. He's not sure exactly what she's going through, but he knows that the weight of it is heavy. "I'm sorry to bother you," he says, his tone still kind. I noticed you and thought maybe I could help. Is there anything I can do?" The woman looks at him, unsure at first, as though she's trying to decide whether she should trust him. She takes a deep breath, glancing down at the baby in her arms. The baby's cries have quieted down a little, but it's clear that they both need help. I don't know, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't have anywhere else to go. I lost my job and, well, things just kept getting worse. I've been living in this car for a few weeks now. I don't know where else to turn." Keanu's heart tightens at her words. He's seen the struggles of homelessness before, but something about this woman and her baby makes it feel even more urgent. He takes a step closer, keeping his distance so as not to overwhelm her. "It's okay," he says gently. "You don't have to explain everything to me. I can see you're doing your best, but I can help. I know a place nearby where you can stay for the night. A safe place for you and your baby." The woman looks up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. She shakes her head, not quite able to process what he's saying. "But I don't even know you. I can't. I'm just a guy who saw someone who needs help," Keanu interrupts softly. "No strings attached. I promise." For a moment, the woman simply stares at him, as if trying to figure out if he's serious. It's been so long since anyone offered to help her without expecting anything in return. She can feel the exhaustion in her bones, and it's as though a part of her is too tired to trust again. But there's something in Keanu's eyes, something kind, something genuine, that makes her want to believe. Okay, she finally says, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay, I'll go. Thank you. Keanu nods, relieved. He can see the hesitation still in her, but he knows that taking that first step trusting him isn't easy. It's a start, and sometimes that's all it takes. He reaches into his pocket, pulling out his phone. With a few quick taps, he arranges for a hotel room nearby, a place where she and her baby can sleep safely for the night. It's not a long-term solution, but it's a start. I'll make sure you have everything you need, he says, offering her a reassuring smile. Let's get you there. The woman, still in shock, nods silently. She doesn't know how to thank him, doesn't know what words could possibly express her gratitude, but she's already starting to feel something she hasn't felt in a long time, Hope. Keanu walks with her to the sedan, keeping his steps slow and steady, trying to make her feel as comfortable as possible. He opens the passenger door for her, offering her a place to sit. Let's get you and your baby to a warm bed, he says. With a calm confidence that somehow reassures her, as they drive to the hotel, Keanu makes small talk, but it's clear that the woman's mind is still spinning. She stares out the window, occasionally glancing down at her baby, who has finally fallen asleep in her arms. For the first time in weeks, she feels the weight of her worries ease just a little. When they arrive at the hotel, Keanu doesn't make a scene. He pays for a week's stay in advance, ensuring that the room is safe and comfortable for both the woman and her child. He arranges for a private driver to take them there, making sure that they have a safe place to stay, even if it's just for a little while. As Keanu turns to leave, the woman grabs his arm gently. Thank you, she says, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to say it, but thank you. Keanu smiles softly, shaking his head. You don't have to say anything. Just take care of yourself. I'm glad I could help. And with that, he walks away, leaving the woman and her baby to settle into a warm bed. The night feels a little less dark, and for the first time in a long while, the woman feels a sense of peace. The hotel room was small but clean, with soft white linens on the bed and a quiet calm in the air. It wasn't much, but for the woman it felt like a sanctuary. She sat on the edge of the bed, still trying to process what had happened. Just hours before, she had been sitting in her car, feeling like the world had completely turned its back on her. And now she was here in a warm room, with the promise of safety for at least one night. She held her baby in her arms, gazing down at the tiny face that was now calm and peaceful in sleep. The baby's chest rose and fell with soft breaths, and for the first time in weeks, the woman felt a sense of relief. The weight of worry, which had been her constant companion, seemed to lift, even if just for a moment. Her mind wandered back to the strange encounter with the man who had helped them. She couldn't believe how quickly things had changed. A few hours ago, she had been struggling with how to feed her baby, worrying about where they would sleep, when suddenly, a stranger had offered her a lifeline. She had always been independent. She had always prided herself on her ability to figure things out on her own. But life had a way of throwing unexpected challenges, and it seemed like everything had fallen apart at once. She had lost her job due to health issues, which led to the loss of her apartment. She hadn't been able to find stable work since then, and every attempt to get back on her feet felt like it led to a dead end. The woman glanced at the small kitchenette in the corner of the room. There was a small fridge, a microwave, and a couple of shelves stocked with basic supplies, things she hadn't had the luxury of having for a long time. She could cook a warm meal here. She could bathe. She could rest. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She stood up quickly, still not entirely used to the fact that she didn't have to worry about being moved along. She opened the door to find a hotel employee standing there with a small basket of fresh towels, toiletries, and some snacks. "Good evening," the woman said, smiling kindly. "I just wanted to bring you some things to make your stay a little more comfortable." The woman nodded, taking the basket. "Thank you," she said softly, feeling a little embarrassed by her overwhelming sense of gratitude. I really appreciate this." The employee smiled back. "Of course. If you need anything else, just let us know." As the door closed, the woman felt a wave of emotion she hadn't expected. She was used to people turning their backs on her, to being looked down upon because of her situation. But here she was treated with kindness. Here, she wasn't just another homeless person. She was someone deserving of comfort. She set the basket on the bed, carefully unpacking the items inside. As she did, her thoughts returned to the man Keanu, she reminded herself. She didn't know why he had helped her. People in his position didn't usually take the time to stop and help someone like her. It wasn't as if he was obligated. And yet, he had done it without a second thought, without any judgment. It was almost too much to process. She hadn't asked for his help. She hadn't even known how to ask. But he had seen her, really seen her, and in that moment he had done something that most people wouldn't have done. He hadn't been concerned with what others might think or whether it would inconvenience him. He had simply offered help, no questions asked. As the night wore on, she couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. She had been afraid to hope for so long, afraid to believe that things could get better. But now, with a clean room, a warm bed, and food for tomorrow, she could see that maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. She could start again. She could find a way to rebuild, for herself and for her baby. The baby shifted in her arms, and she gently rocked back and forth, humming a soft lullaby. The sound of her voice filled the room, calming both her and the child. She thought about what tomorrow might bring. She wasn't sure where to go from here, but she knew she couldn't stay stuck. She had to keep moving forward, no matter how small the steps. In the morning, she would make calls, reach out to shelters, look for any available resources. She would figure out what she needed to do to get back on her feet. She would apply for jobs, even if she had to start over completely. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. She knew that now, later that night, as she lay in bed, the baby nestled beside her, she thought about Keanu again. She had been so afraid to trust anyone, especially a stranger, but he had shown her a kindness she didn't even know she needed. There was something special about the way he had treated her, not like someone who was beneath him, but as an equal. It made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as invisible as she had felt for so long. As she drifted off to sleep, her thoughts turned to the future. She couldn't undo the past, but she could try to make the future better. Keanu's simple act of kindness had reminded her that there were still good people in the world. It wasn't just the help he had given her, but the way he had made her feel seen, heard, and cared for. It was something she hadn't felt in a long time, and it gave her the strength to believe that things could get better. The next morning, the sun streamed through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the room. The baby woke up first, stretching and yawning, and the woman smiled as she picked the little one up. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely overwhelmed. She felt like there was hope on the horizon, like she could make a change. She wasn't sure exactly how to get there yet, but she had the time and the space to figure it out. She got dressed, her mind already racing with plans. She would call a shelter. She would look into job opportunities. She would get the baby checked by a doctor just to make sure everything was okay. And, most importantly, she would keep moving forward. No more sitting in a car, no more worrying about what would happen next. It was time to take control of her life again. After breakfast, she took a moment to reflect on the night before. Keanu's kindness was still fresh in her mind. She hadn't been able to thank him properly, but she hoped he understood. It wasn't just about the hotel room or the food, it was the way he had treated her. It was the belief he had shown in her, even when she hadn't believed in herself. As she looked out the window, watching the world begin to wake up around her, she realized something important. Her life wasn't over. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't be easy, but there was a chance. And that chance was all she needed. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she wasn't alone anymore. Keanu had shown her that sometimes all it takes is a small act of kindness to change someone's life. And now, with a little bit of hope in her heart, she was ready to take the first step forward. The following days passed slowly, but in the best way possible. For the first time in what felt like forever, the woman didn't wake up to a cold, hard reality. She woke up in a soft bed with her baby beside her, in a room that felt like a safe space. There was no uncertainty hanging over her head, no feeling of desperation gnawing at her insides. Instead, there was room to breathe. She took her time in the morning, preparing for the day ahead. The hotel had given her a fresh start, even if only temporarily. The simple act of having a stable place to sleep made her feel more grounded, as if she had a little control over her life again. She didn't have to worry about the next meal or the next place to sleep. For now, she could focus on taking the next step. Her baby was in a better mood today. Maybe it was the extra rest, or maybe just the warmth of a safe space. The woman smiled as she fed her baby, rocking gently back and forth, enjoying this moment of peace. It was a small thing, but it felt significant. It reminded her that things didn't always have to be so hard. There could be moments of calm, and those moments could be cherished once her baby was settled. The woman took a deep breath and picked up her phone. She had made a mental list of things she needed to do, things she needed to change. The first step was finding a job, but she knew it wasn't going to be easy. Her resume was outdated and her work history was patchy, but she was determined to try. She started searching through job listings on her phone, scrolling through pages of opportunities that seemed just out of reach. There were plenty of entry-level positions available, but each one felt like a mountain to climb. Still, she didn't let herself get discouraged. She couldn't afford to. Her baby needed her to be strong. So, she started applying to a few places, typing out her information and writing cover letters that felt more hopeful than she'd expected. Each application felt like a tiny victory, a small step toward reclaiming her life. But it wasn't just about finding a job. She needed to find resources to help her get back on her feet: food assistance, childcare, healthcare for her baby. She spent hours calling different organizations, talking to people who could guide her toward the help she needed. Some were able to offer immediate assistance. Others put her on waiting lists. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like there were people out there who cared, who were willing to help her rebuild. In the evening, after a long day of phone calls and research, she sat in the hotel room and made dinner for herself and her baby. The simple act of cooking, of putting a meal together, felt like another small victory. She hadn't been able to cook a proper meal in weeks, and it reminded her that even the smallest things mattered. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was starting to live again. That night, as she sat down to eat, she found herself thinking about Keanu again. She hadn't seen him since he had helped them settle into the hotel. He had made a difference in her life, but he hadn't asked for anything in return. She didn't even know how to thank him properly. All she could do was try to move forward, to make the most of the opportunity he had given her. She couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for his kindness, and for the first time, she felt like maybe there were still good people in the world, people who weren't just out for themselves, but who genuinely cared about others. As the days went by, things slowly started to fall into place. She had found a temporary job at a local cafe. It wasn't much, but it was enough to pay for the room for a few more weeks. She had also managed to get her baby a doctor's appointment, and everything looked good. They were both starting to feel healthier, and the stress that had weighed on them was starting to lift. Little by little, the woman knew this was only the beginning. But for the first time, she could see a way forward. She wasn't out of the woods yet, but she was on her way. She kept applying for more permanent jobs, keeping up the momentum. She was also looking into longer-term housing options, reaching out to different shelters and housing programs. It wasn't easy. Many of the places had long waiting lists, but she was hopeful. Every small step felt like a giant leap compared to where she had been just a few weeks ago. One evening, as she sat down with her baby after another long day, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from the cafe she had applied to earlier. They wanted to set up an interview. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the message. This was the chance she had been waiting for. She quickly responded, setting up the interview for the next day. She couldn't believe it. After all the setbacks, all the doubts, it was finally happening. The next morning, she woke up early, carefully dressed in the best outfit she had, and made sure her baby was settled with some toys before heading out. She was nervous, but she was determined. She knew that this job wouldn't solve everything, but it was a step in the right direction. It would help her stay on her feet a little longer while she figured out the next part of her journey. The interview went better than she expected. The manager was kind and understanding, and though her work history was a bit unconventional, He seemed to appreciate her honesty and determination. By the end of the interview, they offered her a part-time position. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She had a job, a steady income, and the promise of more work in the future. That night, as she sat in her hotel room, the woman looked down at her baby and smiled. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she was starting to believe in herself again. She had a job. She had a roof over her head. And most importantly, she had hope. Keanu's kindness had shown her that there was still good in the world. And now she was beginning to see that there was still hope for her. 2. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work, phone calls, and more applications. She kept pushing forward, never stopping, never looking back. Each day brought its challenges, but each day also brought new opportunities. Slowly, the pieces of her life started to fall into place, and she began to build something new. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. One day, while on a break at work, she checked her email. There was a message from the housing program she had applied to weeks ago. She opened it, her heart racing. It was an offer for an apartment, one that she could afford. She couldn't believe it. This was the big step, the one she had been working toward. With a few more pieces of the puzzle in place, she was finally able to move out of the hotel room and into her own place. It wasn't a mansion, but it was home. It had a small kitchen, a cozy living room, and enough space for her baby to crawl around. She felt a sense of pride as she looked around the apartment. This was her new beginning. And as she stood in the middle of her new home, looking out the window at the city below, she thought about Keanu once again. She had no way of thanking him for everything he had done, no way of expressing how deeply his kindness had impacted her. But she knew one thing for sure. Because of him, she had started to believe in herself again. And for that, she would be forever grateful. The days that followed felt different. For the first time in a long time, the woman had a rhythm to her life, a sense of purpose. She woke up every morning with a plan, and though some days were harder than others, she had begun to see the changes she had been hoping for. The job at the cafe was going well, and every paycheck, no matter how small, gave her a sense of pride. She had the stability she needed to keep moving forward. Her baby, too, was thriving. There had been a time when she had worried every day about her child's health, unsure if she could afford the necessary checkups or even enough food. But now, with her new job and the help she'd found, she didn't have to worry about those things anymore. She was able to take her baby to the doctor for regular checkups, and the peace of mind that came with knowing her child was healthy made all the difference. But it wasn't just the practical aspects of her life that were improving. She had started to believe in herself again. When she had been living in her car, she had lost all sense of who she was. She had become defined by her circumstances, feeling like a failure, like she was nothing more than the label of homeless. Now, as she went about her daily routine, she felt more like herself again. She was proud of the small steps she had taken, and with each new accomplishment, whether it was paying for a new set of clothes for her baby or completing a shift at work without feeling completely drained, her confidence grew. One afternoon, she sat down during her break at the cafe, scrolling through her phone. She checked her email and saw a message from a local organization that helped with housing assistance. She clicked on it, expecting to see another long wait list, but this time, the email had good news. They had an apartment opening up, one that was within her budget, in a safe neighborhood, and available in just a few weeks. Her heart raced as she read through the details. This was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. She quickly responded, arranging a time to tour the apartment. The next few days were a whirlwind of excitement and nervousness. She arranged for a babysitter to look after her baby while she went to see the apartment. When she arrived, she couldn't believe her eyes. It was small but cozy, with a clean kitchen, a living room that got plenty of natural light, and a small bedroom that would be perfect for her and her baby. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She felt a lump form in her throat as she stood there, looking at the place that would soon be her home. It felt real now. Her dream of stability and a fresh start was within reach. A few days later, she signed the lease. She could hardly believe it. After everything, after all the uncertainty, she was going to have her own apartment. She was going to be able to put down roots and create a home for her baby. She couldn't wait to move in, but she knew she needed to take it one step at a time. Over the next week, she spent her free time preparing for the move. She went through her things, deciding what she needed to bring with her and what she could leave behind. She bought a few new items for the apartment: a set of bed sheets, a small table for the kitchen, a few toys for her baby. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make the space feel like a home. The day she moved in was a blur of activity. She rented a small truck to carry her things, and with the help of a few kind friends she had made at the cafe, she was able to move everything into the new apartment. When the last box was brought inside, she stood in the doorway of the apartment, taking in the scene. This was it. This was her new beginning. That night, after everything was unpacked and settled, she sat on the couch in her new living room, her baby asleep in the crib she had set up in the corner. She allowed herself a few moments to just sit in the quiet, to feel the weight of the change she had gone through. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. She had done it. She had built a life for her and her baby, step by step, with the help of kind people along the way. As she sat there, she thought back to the night she had met Keanu. That chance encounter had been a turning point in her life. Without him, she wasn't sure where she would be right now. His kindness had been the spark that had reignited her hope. She knew she would never be able to repay him for what he had done, but she was determined to honor his kindness by making the most of the opportunity he had given her. The next day, as she continued to settle into her new apartment, she thought about what she could do next. She had a stable job, a safe home, and her baby was healthy. But there was still more to be done. She wanted to go back to school, to finish her education and find a better job. She wanted to make sure her baby had every opportunity for a bright future. She knew it would take time, but she also knew that she was capable of more than she had given herself credit for. She made a list of her goals for the future, breaking them down into smaller steps. Going back to school would take time and effort, but it was possible. She could start with a few online courses while continuing to work part-time. She could look into scholarships and financial aid to help pay for her tuition. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it was clear that she had the strength to walk it. As the weeks passed, she found herself growing more confident. Every time she paid a bill, every time she made a small improvement to her apartment, it felt like a victory. She was no longer living in survival mode. She was living with purpose. And while there were still challenges ahead, things like childcare, balancing work and school, and managing finances, she knew that she could handle them. She had come this far, and she was determined to keep moving forward. One evening, as she sat at her kitchen table, eating a simple dinner with her baby in her lap, she realized something important. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. She had a home, a job, and a plan for the future. Most importantly, she had hope. For the first time in a long time, she could look ahead without feeling overwhelmed by fear and uncertainty. She knew she still had a long way to go, but she wasn't alone anymore. She had the support of people who cared, and she had the inner strength to keep going. She had learned that no matter how hard life got, there was always a way forward. It might take time, it might take effort, but with patience, perseverance, and the right kind of help, anything was possible. As she sat there, watching her baby play on the floor, she felt a deep sense of peace. Life was still unpredictable, but now she knew that she could handle whatever came her way. She had made it through the hardest parts, and now it was time to build something beautiful. The woman smiled to herself, knowing that she had taken back control of her life. And as she looked down at her baby, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey she had been on. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. She was proud of how far she had come, and she was excited for the future. The days blurred together as the woman continued to settle into her new life. She had always believed that one small change could lead to bigger transformations, but she never imagined it could happen this quickly. There were still hard moments. Of course, those days when the exhaustion from balancing work, childcare, and everything else seemed like it would break her, but more often than not, the challenges felt manageable now. She was no longer overwhelmed by the weight of her past, and every small victory felt like a testament to how far she had come. One of the most surprising changes was the way her mindset had shifted. Not so long ago, she had been convinced that things would never improve, that the struggles would always be there, no matter how hard she tried. But now she was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could take control of her life and steer it in the direction she wanted. It wasn't just about the big things either. Every day she found herself making small choices that added up. When she went to work, she didn't just show up to get through the day. She worked with purpose, taking pride in every task, no matter how small. She made sure to greet her customers with a smile, to give her best, even when she was tired. It wasn't always easy, but every compliment, every positive word from a customer made it worth it. Her baby, too, was thriving. She had taken the time to research parenting techniques, reading books and articles during her breaks or after her child had gone to sleep. She knew that being a good parent wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up day in and day out and doing her best. And though there were moments when she doubted herself, she knew she was doing the right thing. Her child was happy, healthy, and loved, and that was what mattered most. One weekend, after a long week of work, she decided to take a break and spend the day with her baby. They went to the park together, where her baby could crawl around on the grass and watch the other children play. The woman sat on a bench nearby, watching her child explore the world with wide, curious eyes. It was a moment of pure peace, a simple moment that she could have never imagined back when she was living in her car, constantly worried about what would come next. As she sat there, her thoughts wandered back to that night, when she had met the man who had changed everything, Keanu. Even now, months later, she couldn't fully wrap her mind around it. How had he seen her that night? How had he known what she needed, even when she didn't? She remembered the way he had approached her, not with pity, not with judgment, but with a calm understanding that made her feel human again. She had never experienced anything like it before. His kindness had been the key to unlocking a new chapter in her life, one that was filled with hope, possibility, and most importantly, a sense of worth. She still hadn't been able to thank him properly. She thought about sending him a letter or an email, but the words never seemed right. How could she express how deeply his simple act of kindness had impacted her? How could she explain that because of him she had found the strength to believe in herself again? For now, though, she knew that she didn't need to find the perfect words. She was living proof of the difference that kindness could make. Every time she took a step forward, every time she made a decision that moved her closer to her goals, she was honoring the gift he had given her. She didn't need to thank him with words. She just needed to live her life the best way she knew how. Later that evening, after they had returned home from the park, she put her baby to bed and sat down at her kitchen table, where she had spent many quiet nights before, trying to figure out what came next. Now, however, her life had direction. Her goals were clearer and her purpose was stronger. She had begun taking classes online to work toward finishing her education, and she had set her sights on a career that would allow her to provide a better life for her child. It was a long road ahead, but she knew it was a road worth traveling. She thought about the future, about all the things she still wanted to accomplish. There was still so much to do and so many obstacles to overcome, but she was no longer afraid of the challenges. She had learned over the past few months that it wasn't the obstacles that defined her, it was the way she responded to them. She had the strength to face whatever came her way, and she would do it with the same resilience that had carried her through the toughest parts of her journey. The phone rang, breaking her thoughts. It was a call from the housing program she had applied to months ago. Her heart skipped a beat as she answered. "Hello?" she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hi, this is Rachel from the housing program," the voice on the other end said. "I'm calling to let you know that we have an opening for permanent housing. You've been selected." She couldn't believe it. After months of waiting, after all the uncertainty, she had finally secured a place to call home. This wasn't just a temporary solution anymore. It was permanent. She felt tears well up in her eyes as she listened to the details, but she didn't cry. She had come so far, and this was just another victory in her journey. When the call ended, she sat there for a few moments, trying to process the news. She had a permanent home. She had done it. The future was still uncertain, Of course, there were always going to be challenges to face, but for the first time in a long time, she felt truly secure. The next day, she went to visit the housing program office to complete the paperwork. As she sat in the waiting area, she looked around at the other people there, some of them in similar situations to hers, others who had been in the program for longer. She realized that she wasn't alone in this. There were others who had faced hardships, just like her, and who were also working hard to rebuild their lives. When it was her turn to speak with the housing coordinator, the woman felt a sense of pride as she handed over the paperwork. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice full of gratitude. "This means everything to me." The coordinator smiled warmly. "You've earned it. You've worked hard and you've shown so much strength. We're glad to be able to offer you this opportunity." As she walked out of the office, the woman felt lighter than she had in months. The weight that had been on her shoulders for so long was finally lifting. She was no longer just surviving. She was thriving. And it wasn't just the material things, the apartment, the job that made her feel this way. It was the knowledge that she had the strength to face whatever came next. She had taken control of her life and she wasn't going to let go. That evening, she sat down with her baby, just as she had so many times before. But this time, there was a quiet joy in her heart. She knew that the future wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be hers. And she was ready for it. She had come a long way, and with each passing day, she was building a better life for herself and for her child. The journey wasn't over, but the woman knew she had everything she needed to keep moving forward. Hope, strength, and the belief that anything was possible.